Hello, my name is Deontay Randolph, and welcome back to another episode of They Did What? The number one documentative podcast in the United States. Last week, we talked about a robbery in Bremerton, Washington in 2006 that was solved 3 years later through DNA evidence left at the crime scene. But today, we're going to talk about something much more sinister. Let me tell you guys, this case is crazy. Crazy with a capital C. Stay tuned through the entire podcast, because I have a surprise for y'all at the end. So, with all that being said, let's get into it. Ricardo Leyva Munoz Ramirez, commonly known as Richard Ramirez, was born on February 29th, 1960, in El Paso, Texas. Richard's early life was heavily influenced by his cousin Mike, a Green Beret. Mike would often show 12-year-old Richard many horrifying photos of his time in the Vietnam War, including photos of raped Vietnamese women and the dead bodies of his victims. Mike was also known to supply marijuana for Richard. His childhood was filled with hysteria. Honestly, too much to mention. But it wasn't until Richard witnessed Mike murder his wife Jessie in cold blood did Richard truly spiral into the mania that gives him his fame. After this, Richard became withdrawn and began to become interested in Satanism and consuming LSD. And as he grew older, his sexual desires and violence became synonymous. While working at a Holiday Inn as a teenager, Richard was fired for molesting 2 children in an elevator and attempting to rape a hotel guest. At the age of 22, Richard would move to California, where his dastardly acts would begin. The first of the Night Stalker crimes would begin on June 28, 1984, where Richard Ramirez sexually assaults, stabs, and almost decapitates Jenny Vinco, a 79-year-old Los Angeles resident. His murders really had no constraints. Richard would rape, torture, and psychologically affect his victims before killing them. Richard was known to leave satanic markings at crime scenes and force his victims to hail Satan. That's crazy stuff, crazy stuff. He often bound and stole from his victims as well. Richard Ramirez was a serial killer with no preference. He killed people as young as 9 and as old as 79, from different races, genders, and backgrounds. Killing and violence was his goal. After essentially a year of terror for Los Angeles residents, Ramirez was caught. He was identified while driving around California. A group of Mexican women saw him and screamed, El Matador, or in Spanish, the Killer. After getting spooked, Ramirez attempted to flee, only to be caught and beat by righteous citizens wanting to cause an end to his killing spree. Though Richard Ramirez's clout as one of the most famous serial killers eventually led to his capture, Richard Ramirez was identified initially through fingerprint technology. Ultimately, Ramirez left fingerprints on stolen cars, window screens, and many other places. From his first murder, the police recovered a fingerprint Ramirez left on the screen he used to enter. I bet he wishes he knew that then. Also, Ramirez was seen in many stolen cars, and police managed to get fingerprints off of a few of them. This case was super high profile for a multitude of reasons. This was one of the first times an automated fingerprinting system was used on a case. During this time, fingerprint technology was just coming onto the market and very expensive. The device was purchased by the California Department of Justice for this case. The AFIS system, for short, immediately identified Richard Ramirez, and his face was plastered throughout the media, and he was dubbed the Night Stalker, based on his MO of creeping in at night and brutally killing his victims. Without this system, I bet the Night Stalker would not have been captured as fast. Ramirez would later be tried for his actions on July 22, 1988. He was seen with pentagrams on his hands and often interrupting the court proceedings with obscenities and satanic remarks. Though, the trial was interrupted when one of the jurors, Phyllis Singletary, did not arrive to jury duty. What? Phyllis was found dead in her apartment the next day. I know. Somehow Richard Ramirez killed her in an effort to change the outcome of his trial. But no! She was killed by her husband the day before, who later killed himself. Ugh. I guess we could talk about that another day. The trial was halted and began again early the next year. By September 20th, 1988, Richard Ramirez was convicted on 12 counts of murder, 5 attempted murder charges, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. His reign of terror was finally over. And that's the story of Richard Ramirez. And as promised for y'all, I told y'all I had a surprise. You ready? Alright. The producers over here at They Did What managed to get an exclusive interview on the phone with the man himself, Richard Ramirez. Alright, so we're calling in the San Quentin State Prison right now. Hello, Richard. Given your notoriety and in the interest of time, I'll skip all the introductions and hop straight into some questions I'm sure the listeners would want to hear. So with that being said, tell me about you.
The world has been fed many lies about me. I have read very few truths.
What do you mean by that?
Just a guy. Just a guy.
Just a guy. That's a very interesting way to put it. Don't you think that you're more than just a guy, given all the murders and deviant acts you've partaken in?
Serial killers do on a small scale what governments do on a large one. They are a product of the times, and these are bloodthirsty times. Even psychopaths have emotions if you dig deep enough, but then again, maybe they don't.
How do you feel about your emotions?
I'll tell you what, I gave up on love and happiness a long time ago.
Okay. Given that your murders took place in the 80s, and now we're here in 2010, what would you tell people today?
People in this day and age are brainwashed and programmed like a computer at being nothing more than puppets. This nation, this country is founded in violence. Violent delights tend to have violent ends. Madness is something rare in individuals, but in groups, people, and ages, it is a rule. Killing is killing, whether done for duty, profit, or fun. Men murdered themselves into this democracy.
That's a very interesting take. During your court proceedings in the late 80s, you had a pentagram on your hand, symbolizing Satan. Do you worship Satan?
There are different sects of Satanism.
I'm not exactly sure what that means, but we'll keep it moving. A lot of people have called you the manifestation of evil. Are you evil?
We are all evil in some form or another, are we not?
So you admit to being evil. Do you think this evil drove you to do what you did to so many people?
A serial killer comes about by circumstances and like a recipe, poverty, drugs, child abuse. These things, contribute to a person, to a person's frustration and anger, and at some point in life, he explodes.
Did you have this recipe?
This is a wicked world, and in a wicked world, wicked people are born. I'm not going to blame society, my race, or people, or anything. It is up to the individual like myself to keep on knocking on whatever door they want to get into.
Well, thank you, Richard. Sadly, that's all the time we have today. Again, I really appreciate you coming on to talk, and I'm sure other listeners did as well. Well, that wraps it up, folks. Thanks for listening to another installation of They Did What? I'm Deontay Randolph, signing off.